with presentation again. Everybody see this okay? And hear me all right? Okay. Okay, so we're, excuse me. We finished up with a little bit of the history of where dogs came from, how we got to this point in time over the past few million, tens of millions of years to get to this point where we have different canids now and different lines of those predators like bears and cats and stuff like that. So they all come from the same base animal back tens of millions of years. But the most recent time frame of split between canines has been the wolf dog connection and then the human influence. So the reason I go over that fairly heavily, we go into that much more in depth, frankly, in more advanced classes, because it's important to understand and frankly respect these animals for who and what they are and their capabilities. You know, we're not the superior being, we're no better than them. They are just different than us. Consequently, they also think differently. Their brains are different. They are structured somewhat differently. They don't have prefrontal cortexes or outer layers of the cerebral cortex. They don't think in terms of our verbalities. When we think about concepts, things, images, etc., we think in terms of words. They don't. Not one single word. And so when you're trying to communicate with a dog, you have to think on terms of the way they see the universe, not in the way that you are trying to project it. So that's the important thing to understand and respect for them. They have a different way of communicating and certainly inside their own head, the way they think. So we're going to delve a little bit into understanding canine structure. We're going to go over the eyes. There's four main areas that we're going to cover briefly. Eyes, ears, nose, and then feel. So the eyes, excuse me, I've got a little bit of stuff. The eyes, their structure is virtually identical to ours. Eyes developed hundreds of millions of years ago, actually, as a way to detect light. And each animal has a sensitivity to different light ranges. Understanding that I don't think I have an illustration that shows the relationship of the optic nerve to the center of the retina. But if you remember your biology, I'm going to do a quick little thing. So if we look at the eye and the retina, the optic nerve is actually offset from the center of it. And where that comes in, there are no light sensors in that very spot. And so the brain fills in that black gap with general information of what's around it. Otherwise, we just see a black dot in our vision, but we don't, because the brain actually fills in that part of it. If the optic nerve were in the center, we would not have good, direct, detailed vision. Now, for a dog, they have, here's a better illustration. So where the optic nerve, the blood vessels come in, there's actually a blank spot there. The tapetum is the little clear, almost cellophane-like covering over the retina, over those. And when the tapetum starts, when you get older, that starts actually creating little mounds in there, and it affects your direct vision. So that's what happens when you start losing your eyesight. But anyway, you can see that the structure itself is extremely similar to ours, almost identical. The difference is in the rods and cones and what we see as far as what we detect in color versus what they detect in color. Rods and cones, the cones you can see are actually centered around the main center of the back of the retina. Those are the detectors for color. We have 3 color receptors. Dogs have 2. So they do see color. It's not just gray. They see color ranges that go kind of from a brownish purple to a yellow. And but one of the other things that they have is a higher density of rods than we do. And so that density of rods, which is what is simply light detection without color, so in other words, black and white, that's the sensitivity. The rods are more sensitive to low light levels. That's why we see black and white and not color at night. So we see in terms of gray, so do they. But they have 4 times better vision in low light conditions than we do. So it gives them an advantage during low light conditions, darkness, dusk, dawn, nighttime, all of that, for protection as well as for hunting. Observing things in the wild, as well as knowing this type of information and how the brain works for survival. It's the reason that I feed my dogs basically early in the morning and right at dusk. So dusk and dawn, because percentage wise, they are more successful at hunting and finding small prey, certainly during those times. The reason is because nocturnal versus diurnal animals they're at a disadvantage at dusk and dawn, because that's the transition from either waking up or tired and going to sleep. And so they have a bit of a disadvantage in their awareness and capabilities, while the canines have an advantage in their vision and what they're capable of doing. Doesn't mean they're always successful, and it also doesn't mean that that's when they generally hunt their main prey. And I will tell you that most wolves, the larger animals, their main prey is usually elk, deer, that sort of thing. They really don't go after domesticated animals unless they find a good source of that. Generally, wolves stay away from human activity. Those that have been around the edges of human occupation, they understand very quickly, because they're extremely intelligent animals, what the patterns of the humans are. And if the humans actually don't have any type of deterrence, like range riders themselves out there, LGDs, large guardian dogs, flattery, sound, lights, all sorts of things like that. Any type of deterrent helps to keep cattle, sheep, etc., any livestock safe from wolves at a pretty good rate. Knowing many of the people who work with wolves here in the United States, and the investigators over the years, many of the almost 50 to 60% of what is attributed to wolves killing livestock or maiming them is actually packs of dogs that get loose wild, or country dogs that go out and attack. And the differences are evident to the investigators. So a lot of what's attributed to wolves with livestock and livestock managers and raisers wanting to kill off wolves. Well, if they just control the country dogs and wild dogs, they'd have about half of the problem right there. So wolves generally don't want to be anywhere around human activity. Coyotes, on the other hand, are very comfortable being around humans and are very cunning, but they don't go after large animals generally. They'll go after your cat or your small dog, which is a problem, but generally they'll go after moles, voles, small animals that they can take by themselves. They don't really work in a pack as much. They still do for larger animals. So again, I go back to the reason that I feed my dogs at dusk and dawn twice a day is because of the success and we go out and hunt, do an action that replicates a hunt in their minds before they get fed morning and evening. It doesn't take more than 5 to 20 minutes to replicate that. That's their earning it because we're working together as a solid pack. And that's the pro-social behavior that we want to engender. So I'm always out with my pack, either a walk, environmental agility, something in the backyard. We work together, we play, we do something that replicates the action of the entire pack working together for the purpose of eating. And that's an important element in the total cumulative value of everything that you need to work with your dogs. It's not sending the dogs out in the backyard to do something. It's you going out and being part of that. You're either part of the pack or you're not, period. And they see you in a certain way. Most humans are really not part of the pack. They're just a resource, frankly, for the dogs. So, excuse me, one other element of the vision. So the dogs have better vision in low light conditions, up to 4 to 5 times better low light vision than we do. There's one other area that they have that we don't have at all. Dogs can see up to 61% of ultraviolet light range. We call it ultraviolet because we don't see any of it. We see 0%. The ultraviolet range is a great detector for urine, any type of urine. They can see it. It comes out. To us, it would look bright yellow if we shine ultraviolet light on it. I don't know how they see it and what color range, but they are capable of seeing that, whether it's a squirrel, another dog, whatever else, and then they go check out the scent so that they understand what that is, where it came from, what its health is, what its gender is, all of that information that's picked up by sniffing urine. So that's a dog's world from the vision part. The cones are direct vision. There are detail. That's what we read fine print with too. And so we have a denser and more broad range number of cones, our color range, that we can see more detail than a dog does. We're 20/20 supposedly on average when you're younger, and dogs are actually 20/80. So their direct vision is not, or 80/20, whichever way it goes up. Sorry. So their direct vision, they can't read fine print, but they didn't need to. They don't need to work with the detail that humans have over millions of years. Manipulating fine detail and small pieces and tools and things like that. Dogs don't need that. Their eyes are used to detect profile, in other words, silhouette of a shape, to identify animals versus a rock or whatever else, and mainly to detect motion. The rods are there as those are your peripheral vision aspects, and peripheral vision is I'll put it this way, it is the survival mode of your vision. Peripheral vision detects motion immediately without thinking, without recognizing it, have to translate it. It recognizes motion to the side, to the front, everything else. So your peripheral vision is what you use to survive with, and that detects motion. Now, for a pure predator, a top predator like a canine, all they need is motion, and they're instantly, boom, without thought, moving at it because they are the top predator. They fear nothing. We, on the other hand, are not, quote unquote, top predator. We're a predator, yes, but we hesitate, we think, we analyze before we move. So a lot of the disconnect that happens with humans and dogs is the dog sees the motion, moves toward it instantly. The human just stands there and looks, hesitates, fears, wonders if they're going to get sued, all of those things that go through a human's brain. And so the disconnect between what that dog is thinking, doing, and its actions, and what the humans do is, dog, you break trust with the dog. If you're supposed to be in charge and you can't even go after a predator or prey instantly and recognize it, you're not going to be followed as a leader. Okay, I need you to understand that. So you need to practice, and we go through this in actually more advanced courses of practicing vision, sound, recognition, and movement on that instant movement from that. You need to work on yourself. Show your dogs, one, that you recognize the sound, the motion, the smell, all of those things. Practice it. That you recognize it and you act upon it. That doesn't mean you always move forward at it. You may go, yeah, I got this dog, not interested. Let's go somewhere else. The dog has to recognize that you have acknowledged that what their brain is telling them as a predator. Otherwise, you're not part of it. You're just not part of it. So understanding that is a huge part of becoming relevant to your dog. And I don't mean relevant by you feed it, you love it, all of those things. I'm talking about in a natural state in every moment. Can this dog trust you to recognize and handle the threats, the other stuff? And generally, 99.9% of humans, they can't, they don't. And this is the major disconnect that I see when I work with like 10, 12,000 clients over the years. The major disconnect of not recognizing what's important to the dog, and then not being relevant to the dog because of it. That doesn't mean you have to act or play, or you can, once you get the respect from the dog that you are actually aware of these things, you can ignore, you can tacitly disagree with something that the dog gets excited by not bothering with it, because the dog by that time takes a while, but the dog by that time knows that you recognize it. They can trust you. It's almost like someone that doesn't have any senses at all, and you're walking along and go, don't you smell that? And they go, smell what? So that's part of the I aspect, okay? Rods and cones, here's a good illustration. It's why they are called rods and cones. They're shaped that way. The rods are the black and white, the low light condition. The cones need more light to signal. The thing you need to understand also is in about the past 10 years, we've learned, well, we've reevaluated what rods and cones are. They're actually brain cells that extend from our brains into the back of the retina of this other organ. And we have brain cells in many locations throughout our body. We have multiple brains, in fact. You have about 20,000 brain cells, neurons, in your heart. What gives you feeling and thought, the way you think when your heart does things, or what, when you feel it in the heart, you actually do. You actually have neurons. There's over 2 million neurons in your digestive system, your stomach, your intestines, etc. And recent studies have shown that those neurons in your gut, when they say trust your gut, well, that's actually brain cells. They're neurons. So your gut has a brain. And they've shown that there are actually a greater percentage of signals going from those neurons to your brain than your brain to those neurons in your intestinal tract. So in other words, you're getting more information to the brain from your gut than the brain sends out. So that's the collection point. So it's interesting. I love how real science and the right studies over the past 40, 45 years have really changed our understanding of things and how we continue to be able to change our concepts. And that's really what I teach, is I'm trying to interpret the science into the art of working with and living with dogs. So the ears, move on to the ear. This is a good view of the canine ear. Their structure is very, very similar to ours and the way it works. We still have ossicles, cochlea, the stirrups, tympanic membrane, the same canal, just in a little different shape through our skull, but it's still the same exact structure. And the difference is the pinna, or the ear flap, that radar dish that can move and turn. So dogs have a focus point that they can use, and it gives them up to 4 times better hearing than we have. So their capability of hearing things is 4 times better at lower levels than us. They also have a wider range, where ours is supposedly 20 to 20,000 hertz. Generally, that's somewhere actually around 25 to maybe 14 to 16,000 hertz for most adults. A dog's goes from about 20 to 40,000 hertz. So that's why a dog whistle, we don't hear anything but air, and they hear a sound. So, because it's a much higher pitch than we can hear.
I have a quick question about their hearing.
Yes.
I sometimes think that we perceive dog hearing because it's better as them hearing things louder. Is that not true? Is that true? Or do they hear things at the same decibel? They just hear more complexity?
Generally, they hear things at the same decibel level. Now, if you have very loud, like firing a firearm next to a dog, that's going to surprise them. It's going to hurt. We actually have an automatic capability within our brain of lowering that sensitivity, because we know what's coming. like you go into a rock concert and it's 140 decibels, and that's the expectation. So you don't mind it, even though it's really pounding your brain. But the dog doesn't expect that. And so it doesn't have that automatic limiter going off. So it becomes an extremely painful and sensitive thing.
Do they make ear plugs for wartime dogs?
They have the
muffs.
Yeah. That, yes. Yeah, but then again, those type of dogs, the working military dogs, they do protect the ears in certain conditions, but in other conditions, the dogs also are trained to understand this is what's about to happen. And so they have that automatic limiter in their brain. So, good question.
Stuff like radio, sorry, I just have another quick, stuff like radio where we sometimes perceive it as relaxing to the dog. Like, I imagine with radio, they hear a ton of static coming in that we don't hear. And I'm just kind of curious about that.
Yeah, that's why, you know, I've excuse me, I'm a musician. I play different instruments, and I've experimented with music with dogs for decades, 50 years or more. And live music, not electronic necessarily, although some does, but acoustic instruments, especially ones that have wood as a background, have a tonal value to calm the dogs, to relax them. And it's a pure sound to them. Recorded music of the same type seems to have a close effect on them, but other types of music with the electronics and all that are not a calming thing whatsoever. And they probably get a lot of, the pilot signals at 19,500 hertz. Generally, I used to be able to hear it when I was younger, and it just irritated the heck out of me. But I lost that hearing a long time ago. So, but those are the types of things that dogs pick up on. So live instruments, especially wood, bass, so guitars, a double bass, violins, those types of things. And I've noticed in singing a very clear, not piercing, but clear voices. I use what's her name? Alison Krauss as an example. She's one of the best that I've seen have an effect, even in recorded music, on dogs. Her voice is just a very interesting clarity, and yet it's not piercing. And so, her old stuff with Union Station, Alison Krauss using Union Station, which was all acoustic, had a really good effect on dogs. So, I play classical guitar and stuff like that. So every time I sit down with a guitar, they all come in, lay down, and go to sleep around me. So it's a very calming thing. But getting back to, did that help answer your question?
Yeah.
Okay. So the sensitivity level, the low sound sensitivity level, they can hear, for instance, when a storm is coming 10 or 12 miles away, where it takes a lot longer for us to be able to hear it. So when a dog starts getting, they sense other things like the ozone in the air and things like that. We smell things, we feel that energy level too. Difference when there's a storm coming, but they are much more sensitive to it. The other aspect of that, this goes into the feel aspect, which is the last category, but is pertinent here. Since I mentioned storms, is the static electricity in the air. And especially for double-coated dogs, not necessarily the short-coated, although they can as well, but the double-coated dogs, Huskies, German Shepherds, those types, that have undercoat and long, what's called guard fur. That guard fur sticks out and has space between the fur, so it doesn't lay flat like, you know, a Rhodesian Ridgeback or something like that. So those guard fur, what happens is that ozone, that negative, the static electricity, what happens is it charges each one of these in the air, and it causes a static charge to go between those and actually shocks them in their skin to a little bit. So a lot of the fear of storms coming, when you see that, that's because the dog is actually getting shocked from the static electricity. And so they anticipate all of this, and it becomes a phobia then.
Do they have that experience with fireworks as well?
Not on the static electricity part, but it's, again, the shock level. So let me address the static electricity first, and then I'll address the sound levels. So what happens if you get non-scented dryer sheets, the anti-static dryer sheets, and you simply rub it on the outside of the fur of your dog, it's going to prevent that shock from happening, and it'll help in that phobia aspect. So when we get to sound levels, and that's pertinent here to the ear, what you want. Let me erase my map of the world here. So when we have sound levels, generally we've got sound levels in this zone. So this is our expected level, and what you would call background or white noise level. That's speech, that's the normal stuff that's going on in the house, the daily stuff. And all of a sudden fireworks go off, or thunder, or any of those types of things. It's the contrast between this right here, that value, and that is what shocks the sound of, the ear of the dog, basically, because the brain wasn't expecting it. It's a surprise. So when you know something is going to go on, what I would do is take some calming, soothing, not AC/DC on the don't rock out, okay? Don't put some loud music on, but make a sound level that's higher in that range so that the contrast that the dog hears is less shocking. And that's what I do. So dryer sheets, for instance, a thunderstorm dryer sheet, I turn nice music up that they enjoy, acoustic type instruments, and then I will calm the dog by having it sit next to me, and I massage down its back. And that gets it past the fear of those things. That's how I've rehabilitated many dogs who have that sound phobia, because it's shocking to them what humans do. Okay. I hope that helps a little bit.
Hey, Nelson, just one thing I did, and I don't know if this is along the same lines, but they have some music that is like music and then with rain and thunder behind it. And I had a dog that got very scared from thunder, and then I just put that sort of on rotation in with regular music, and it basically sort of rehabilitated him, and he didn't care. Is that something that someone could use?
Yes, anytime that, so here's, I for decades, I've had, trainers from all over the world want to talk to me about some problem they have with their dog or their own dog or whatever else. over the years, and I used to get about 200 of those calls a year. And anytime they described the problem, the answer was always to meet the problem head on. But meeting it head on doesn't mean to oppose, it means to teach. So I would analyze, I would figure out an exercise they could do, and then a transition, a progression that they could do with their dog that's a controlled situation. You can't, if you can do that, such as you don't just wait until someone comes and rings the doorbell to work on it. You have somebody come over and you ring the doorbell, knock the door, etc. You do that over and over so that you can do it as an exercise, and then the dog learns from that what you expect of them and what the situation is. So if you can get a situation like you did to pre-work with the dog to teach it that a storm is not a problem, that's the best and most ideal situation. You don't wait till the thunderstorm comes around. So that's how you set up and you control the parameters of the exercise. That's the best way to teach. So yeah, that was a good thing. Okay.
Nelson, I have another question regarding puppies, and I just got asked a question today. Friends of mine have a new puppy, 9 weeks old, and it was about like how they introduce the recall, and then they brought up maybe with a whistle. And I'm just thinking, when is the dog able to recognize this high voice of the whistle or high sound? And could it do some damage too? I don't know. So that's just more from the development of the puppy, or what time would be
Right.
harming anymore.
Okay. So until about 12 or 13 weeks old, all I would do is present materials, textures, heights, touch, feel, all of the enrichment that a dog needs to understand to live with humans, and building up expectations. So from 9 to 13 weeks, that's really, they're learning a social aspect more than the other types of things that we want to train a dog.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so those are the parts of the brain. The brain develops from a kind of what's called gluons, and they start filling in that cerebral cortex. So it literally grows. It's like when you bake something in the oven and it grows like this. That's what's happening in the brain. So, the base brain, what we call the lizard brain, the brain stem and those things, those are all fully developed by the time they are birthed. But the rest of the brain, it takes about 4 weeks for it to get to a point where there's actually any type of connection between that base brain and the upper brain. So you're working with something that's brand new, that's still growing. And the most important element of that 9 to 13 week period, especially, is to learn about the social, the society, the aspects of connection, what's appropriate, what's not, how hard do I bite, what do I bite, all of those types of things. That's what's most important to a puppy at that point. After that, you can start introducing concepts to it that it can handle. And remember that at some point, about 5 months, typically 5.5, 6 months old to a year old, the brain is still developing things, and things that you think you taught the dog and it should have learned and had are going to go away.
Yeah.
Period. They're just, if you insert one new neuron in a pattern that it learned up to 6 months old, that pattern is no longer there. So when a dog acts like it forgot something, it actually has, because of its development. So you continue to remind, but until a year old, they're not ready to really learn something difficult. Okay.
But just from the ear itself, from the development, like
Yeah,
high
again,
sound or so.
Yeah, I wouldn't
Could
start
they
doing
use-
any of that. I wouldn't start doing any of that till after 13 weeks,
Yeah, yeah,
honestly.
but it's not that it's damaging afterwards or something like that because it hurts them in
Depends on
the
the
ear.
volume level. It depends
Okay.
on the volume level because it's still all new. It's still soft. It's still developing. So, yeah.
Yeah, I didn't advise for the whistle. She was in a puppy class and they
Yeah.
brought it up and I said, no.
Yeah. Good advice.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Let's move on here. So canine ear, one of the aspects of that, the pinna or the articulating ear flap. I always ask in class, have you ever had a situation where some crisp sound is behind you and you feel a twitch or something back behind your ear? That's from your little mouse ancestor 80 million years ago that had articulating ears and trying to move that flap back. We still have the muscle and that memory in our brain. We just don't have the capability of moving our ear anymore. So it's an automatic result. Again, it's about survival. We can't move our ears. They're a certain way for our acoustic ability to survive and what we needed. Canines, however, they're predators, they hunt. That's very important for them to be able to move each one individually. And there's so much communication from the ears too that we can pick up. But generally what happens is if a sound happens and the dog turns its ear here, it's listening for exact direction and distance. The difference between this articulation and this articulation actually changes the amount of sound that comes to the ear and to that ear. So if you see one static, they're looking at distance. They're trying to determine the distance, not just direction. If they're doing this, they're looking for direction. But if they have one static and one move, then they're trying to determine distance. And they can tell the amount of time between when it goes from that ear to the other, and then the degradation of the sound. So that's what they're doing with their ears. Very capable. Okay, let's get to the nose. So the way I've described dogs is it's a nose with legs. And the brain is up to a quarter of a dog's brain. Okay, so let's look at this. So I go a little more in depth on this here than I usually do in the normal class, because we go in heavy depth in advanced classes at the Institute. A dog's brain is about 1/10 the size of a human brain. But when you look at the amount of brain that we actually use for, more than just weighing our head down, generally we're estimating about 10% of our brain is used overall through our entire life. So we have much more capability, even though we don't have the time or we don't have the focus generally as a species. Individuals, there's different individuals that use more percentage of the brain, but it's not that much difference. A 10% difference is a massive difference in itself. So 11% versus 10% is a massive difference in intellect and using the amount of brain. So if a dog's brain is 10% of our size, then they still have the capability, although differently, they think differently, of using that much of the brain. Well, so happens that up to a quarter of a dog's brain, 25% of a dog's brain, in other words, 25% of what we use overall, is used for scent, nose, identification of smell, all of that stuff. That's a massive, massive amount of processing and understanding capability. That's why I say a dog is a nose machine with legs. That's what it is. That's its universe. That's how they see, give value to, understand, detect, all of those things, their universe. We use our eyes to a lesser extent, but that's what we use our eyes for, is to identify things, threats, et cetera, et cetera. Whereas a dog uses its nose to a much greater extent of understanding its universe. That's the way they've developed. That's their genetic mutations that have gotten them to be successful, one of the most successful animals on Earth. So the nose is everything to a dog. The reason that dogs can sense things besides their vision of ultraviolet light, it's not just for urine, it's actually looking at you almost like we would see a heat map from looking at ultraviolet and infrared. So if we looked in those ranges at humans or other animals, we would see patterns of heat and, et cetera, et cetera. We would also see incongruous areas. I will give you an example. A few years ago, doing course 2, we had just gotten the dogs, brought them back. So dogs didn't know. First day that we'd had them, I didn't know those dogs. They didn't know me. And we went to the center at the end of the day to distribute supplies and, the restart of stuff. And I sat down in a chair. It was cool, so I had a jacket on. The dog came over to me, but didn't know me. Stuck its nose in my jacket and pushed it over to the side, and then put its nose exactly where I had an ulcer and sniffed. So it saw through the jacket and everything else that whole, whatever, that incongruous saw something through that ultraviolet vision, and then it corroborated it by smelling that spot. It's the exact spot I have an ulcer, or had an ulcer at that point. So that's the type of information that dogs pick up and can see. So I talk about the total cumulative value of everything that you do all the time with dogs, making the difference and making the connection. And that's one of the things that I mean by that. If you are feeling a certain way and you look different on the outside, you're lying to the dog, and the dog knows it. And the dog will not trust you. So you cannot have fear, anger, frustration, all of these learned later human emotions that dogs don't understand and don't have themselves. That's what causes a lot of the disconnect between humans and dogs. They don't understand us. And if you don't understand something, you can't trust it. So, I joke, I only have one emotion and you can't hurt it. It's because I've worked with dogs so much and for so long, I know how to present myself emotionlessly, other than contrast for them. I can be happy for them and reward them with my happiness for them. It's not about my ego of me being happy because the dog did something for me that I like. It has nothing to do with that. That's pure ego, and it does not connect with the dog. It separates you. It's one of the reasons I hate seeing videos of trainers online showing how great they are with what they made the dog do. They have zero connection with that dog, and they don't even understand it. Dog doesn't trust them to the level that they could get. They're missing 90% of the equation. And that's what I try to share with you guys, and what I try to teach through these courses is that connection is everything, because that is the level of trust, the depth of being accepted and respected by a different species. That's pretty amazing. So that's what I am all about. That's what this system is about, frankly. And so understanding that every time you are incongruous in the way you present yourself, how you smell, how you look, your heat map, your vision, your micro muscles in your face, your stiffness, or anything else, any of those emotions that come out, when that happens, you are incongruous and therefore not trustworthy. And humans do it all the time. You learn to become calm and composed, which is leadership under fire. That's what leadership is. Leadership is composure under fire. No matter what happens, don't worry about it. I got this, buddy. That's what it is. So all those emotions that humans do and all those weird things that we don't even think about, we're on the phone with somebody and all of a sudden we bust out and laugh. The dog looks at us like we're nuts. Or all of a sudden you're chewing somebody out on the phone and the dog goes over into the corner. It's not because it thinks it's mad at you're mad at it, although it doesn't know. So it can't trust you because all of a sudden you just busted out for no reason into these emotional states. Humans are very emotional, and that's what causes a lot of the disconnect and a lot of the problems with dogs. We're asking this predator to come into our home and try to understand us. They can't. Different brain, different capabilities, guys. Okay. So I want you to understand that. I'm emphasizing that now because I think that's frankly one of the most important things you could ever learn.
Can I ask a
So
quick
the
question?
nose is everything. Hi, Marilyn.
So sorry, I don't want to stop you. This is what you're going to go further into, right? Because this is going against other training I've learned, which I'm agreeing with you completely. And I want to understand that calm, composure, neutral thing, because I am not.
And that's where it takes the practicum, in other words, the practice of it. And that's where course 2 gives you 9 days to become composed with a dog you don't know. And you take that information and you can work with any dog thereafter with that.
Okay.
So that's what course 2 is truly all about, is learning, you and the dog learning together how to become trustworthy of each other.
Okay.
To be honest with you. That's what course 2 is really about. There's a ton more information there, obviously, that we do and go through and things, but it's not the exercises. Look, I've had some pretty quote unquote network famous trainers come through that I call collectors. They're really not good with dogs. They're good at marketing, but they're really not good with dogs. They're disconnected and they sit over there and they make notes so they can market themselves better. They have no connection with the dog. The dog is not happy with them the entire time. And they just don't have a sensibility of it. They have no connection with it.
So acting is
and
strange.
they miss the 90%.
Yeah.
And that's a shame.
No, I understand what you're saying because I've seen a lot of trainers. So acting extreme in your behavior to get the dog to act a certain way is something you are against.
Only in rare cases when you want the dog to understand that you're agreeing or disagreeing. And it's only in that very moment. You don't hang on to emotions. They don't. Okay.
Thanks.
Sure. And my other philosophy about all of that is just enough and no more, because it doesn't make sense to the dog to go over a certain point. And working with dogs for decades, allows you to understand where those limits are. Okay, but you work on that and analyze it with each dog that you work, because every dog is different anyway. Okay. Okay, so let's
Hey,
get into the
Nelson.
nodes. Yes.
I just wanted to
Hey, Tom.
try to, I don't know, bring clarity or understanding to like what you're saying about course 2 and how you'll learn more. Or you may not completely learn it in that moment, depending on where you're at. And the story that you tell about when we were doing the leash handling, and I couldn't get Matilda the husky to respond, and you walked up and draped the leash over your finger and walked away with her, and she followed you perfectly. Well, here's the example that you're talking about, how the dog won't follow certain energies and when things are not congruent. And we talked about this later on in, I think it was in course 4, because you had told me, and I had forgotten that I even said it at the end of course 2. I told you I didn't know that I could do this system,
Right.
and you weren't
Right.
sure that you would see me again. So what I've come to realize by continuing to push myself to go through each course is Matilda wouldn't follow me. And I didn't even put this together at the time. When I came to take course 2, it was an extremely difficult point in my life. I was caring for my dying father. He was a difficult individual. I was dealing with a lot of his estate and the mess that he left behind. And while I was in Texas doing course 2, I got a call from my mother that suddenly my father had stopped being able to even walk and was bedbound. And so there was a lot of frustration and anger and stuff. And I didn't put together at the time that Matilda, she was sensing it, even though exterior wise, I might have looked like I was in a calm state of mind. I was not. And then later on, I told you, I believe in course 4, I said, this is that the reason that I didn't know if I could do it was because I didn't even realize that at the time how frustrated and angry I was in dealing with my father's situation. And so these are the things that as you progress through Nelson's courses, you may not even realize the things that are going on or the things that are changing or not changing and why. But as you progress through, you start to get those firework aha moments where you go, oh, that's why this dog wasn't following me, because I was completely unbalanced at the time. She's like, I'm not going with you, but I'll add to your frustration because this is funny. But yeah, that's I just
yeah, Huskies
that,
will always be happy to help
yeah
create
yeah.
more problems.
Yeah. Yeah. So, the things that you're saying about, how they sense things, how they can see, in the ultraviolet levels, and just know what your true inner core is.
Yeah.
They do. You cannot fool them. And so I just thought that might help shed some light on things that are going on when we don't even know it, but the dogs do.
Yeah. Thank you, Tammy. I really appreciate that. Thanks for sharing that. And that is 100% true. Now, I could tell you were very angry the entire time, but then I have that sensitivity.
Yeah.
Especially when I took the leash and then you said, I hate you.
Yeah.
I knew you were half joking.
Right.
I have another question. For dogs that are like psychiatric service dogs that have to be around people who are very anxious and under fire and going in like fight or flight, like I know that I do a lot of practice of meditation, of being present, of training myself to focus, taking space from social media and being on my phone, just so I could be present with my dogs. But I'm like, how do the dogs that are psychiatric service dogs not get sucked into that?
Well, and that's the issue is there are too many dogs that dogs are assumed to be able to handle whatever humans put on them. and that's not possible. So it takes, those are extremely rare dogs that can handle that type of load all the time. People don't understand that when you're working with a service or working dog, they're trying to make something. It's no, again, I go back to the situation. You know how many pro football players there are?
I know nothing about football, so no.
Okay, well, okay, so you think pro football, okay, so there's well over 1 million high school football players, okay, at any one time. Maybe 20,000 20,000 college players, and there may be 2,000 or less pro football players, including all, Canadian pro and everything else. That's it. So you're looking at, 1 million people who wanted to play football in high school, who had that predilection, and the 20 millions more that don't. So look at those percentages. That's the same percentage as taking a dog somewhere randomly and trying to make it a pro football player, and it doesn't want to play football in the first place. So understanding that these are extremely rare dogs, the reason I chose Bosch to actually become one of my dogs was because of his extreme high intelligence, his rare sensitivity, and all of the entire combination of everything. I knew he could handle just about anything I put on him. And that is an extremely rare dog, period. I know people love their dogs. They feel about them certain ways. I analyzed this dog from the time it was a 5-week-old puppy on, and came to the conclusion that this dog could handle any service or working situation you could put on it. And then he became my dog. And so those are the types of things that you need to understand in a service, especially a service dog and a psychiatric drug. Very few dogs are going to be able to be capable of handling that kind of emotional support. In other words, human dumping all that on a dog continuously. The dogs that I had that I developed in my personal pack over, the decades of rehabilitating severe case behavior dogs, it took 2-3 years to teach them each one of those, and I had to select them purposely for that purpose. They were capable of doing that job, and understanding that what I needed from them in every situation. It took 2 or 3 years to teach them what all those situations were and how to behave when another severe case dog comes in, one that wants to fight them, kill them, one that wants to run away from the pack and become, and essentially become its own pack, which is not a good situation either. And so, my dogs were taught that, and yet they were extremely rare and capable dogs. They still needed a break from it. And so, 2 months out of the year, I had to just say, sorry, no more dogs can't handle it. They need a break. And so even these rare and well-trained dogs needed a break from that type of pressure. It's no different than the guys in the stress level of the air controllers and the air traffic towers in the airports, or high-end, high stress stuff. You need a break from it every once in a while, even if you are the best in the world. So that's an excellent question. It's something that we get into in the service and working dog puppy development course that's coming up in New York.
So with that being said, I feel like we need to really, as a society, question the concept of emotional support animals.
Yes.
Because those are the animals that need support from their humans, and that, everyone just says, because those dogs aren't being trained. specifically, and it is just essentially creating negative behaviors.
What it is
Dogs, a pet dog like that.
yeah, what it is weak, broken, and uncertain humans just want to love on a dog.
Mhm.
It's no different than a pet dog. It's just in a worse situation, frankly. So, yeah, emotional support animal has no rights as far as ADA goes, as you know, and they shouldn't, because they're not trained. They're simply, you could. It's no different than giving someone a blanket and sucking their thumb. That's all it is. It's something to hang on to.
Well, now I'm even thinking it's setting dogs up for behavioral issues because we're putting that pressure on them.
Yes. Yeah. So
I have a question
good line. Yes, Karen.
on the psychiatric service dog and how.
Okay, so you guys who've been through advanced courses, we're getting into real advanced things. I'm still trying to go over the basic stuff. Go ahead, Karen. We'll do that, and then I got it.
It's just about the relationship. How can a psychiatric service dog and a person who has a psychiatric disorder do your relationship-based work?
Well, and that's where, working with, PTSD veterans and teaching them how to rehabilitate a dog helps to rehabilitate them. I relate it to the human aspects and what's going on inside them and show them that there's a similarity with the dog, and they help the dog and therefore help themselves. So they're both learning together. There you go. Rather than giving them an animal to go sit in a room and, hug, let's help that dog. I would switch it around. And that, once you get into a help mode, first of all, you stop becoming a victim. So, okay. All right. Let's get to the nose. Okay. The biggest, most important part of being a dog, the nose. Okay. Oops. There we go. So the nose and other areas of detection. On average, there's 20 million scent receptors, anywhere from 120 to 320 million scent receptors. So on average, dogs have somewhere around 220 overall, all of the different breeds. Boston Terrier or Pug has around 120, 140 million scent receptors. A German Shepherd, 300 million, a Bloodhound, about 320 to 340 million scent receptors. Those are cells in the epithelium, which is we'll go into that. Humans have approximately 5 million scent receptors. So our capabilities are vastly different in picking up that particle, that scent. That's all it's for. So that part of the scent receptors. The olfactory size and capability. So the olfactory bulb on the part of the brain, I have illustrations here in a minute to show you where that is up to the olfactory bulb of the brain, which is in the below the frontal cortex in both our brains, humans and dogs, is up to 60 times the size in a dog versus a human. So that is the immediate, and with a dog, the epithelium is there, the olfactory bulb is right there. So it's an immediate direct connection. It is giving value and understanding to what it's detecting. That's what the olfactory bulb is for. So it's immediate, and that part of the brain does nothing else. That's its job. And so 60 times the volume, understanding that a brain, in other words, the cells, the neurons, dendrons, etc., that make up a brain, those neurons fire and can fire 1,000 different times and mean 1,000 different things for that one single neuron, depending on what else it's connected to and what pattern. So when you look at 60 times the volume, you're talking about billions of times the capability over ours. And so with that, so the brain focus, again, up to a quarter of the brain, not just the olfactory bulb, but the rest of the brain can get involved in detection, value, what it is, all of these different things, giving that information to the dog. That's its universe, is using the nose, scent. So a dog using its nose is curious. A dog using its eyes is a predator. They don't care about the scent. I want you to understand that. So anytime I had a dog that was using its eyes, I wanted to get it doing nose work, interest in something else, and that gives it a little bit of trust level. So I'm going down, I'm sniffing something, I'm inviting the dog to come to it. Dog goes over, even if it's somewhat disinterested, like an ovcharka and 6 inches away, and it goes like that. That's all I wanted. I made a connection. There's some trust there. We understand each other. And so the dog can detect down to 1 part in 10 quadrillion. Write that out sometime. 1 particle out of 10 quadrillion particles. So when they walk into a room, they smell everything in it, period. They smell you, they smell what you had for breakfast. They know you went and got gas in your car that morning. They know what you stepped in, where you stopped, where you were, all of those things that instant, because they can detect all of that information instantly. So when they go seek something out, all they're doing is trying to identify what it is, where, and get more information. Okay. So 1 particle out of 10 quadrillion. That's all they need. When I was working with, detection dogs, search and rescue, all they needed was that 1 particle, and we're off. So in the recovery, not rescue, but the recovery aspect of things, especially in water recovery, we were able to find bodies in 80 feet of water, because all it took was 1 particle, and they instantly would alert, and that's where we'd have the divers go down and find the bodies. So that's all they need. They're a nose machine. I want you to understand that. And the only thing, the main predator that has better scent up to 6 times over a canine is a bear. And bears and canines came from the same ancestor. So generally, black bear, brown bear, Kodiaks, they have about 4 times better capabilities than dogs even. Whereas a polar bear has 6 times the capability of scent detection, which makes perfect sense because they can smell that seal 10 feet below the ice 2 miles away. So I want you to respect these animals for what they are. They have so much better capabilities than we do in many ways, which is why our connection and how we got together is so important. You need to respect them. That's what I'm trying to do. Yes, Rachel.
About the dogs and the ability to smell, is that with the like the breeds are changing, or like the brachycephalic, how it is, the short nose?
Brachycephalic, brachycephalics, yeah. Brachycephalics, etc. Yeah. So
do they have the same capability? And
actually, one of the best airport detection dogs I ever saw was a Boston Terrier.
Oh.
Now, that smushed in face. I mean, this dog was just focused in on that. So it still has millions of times the capability that we do, even as a brachycephalic dog. So, so they're still much more capable, but the ones, would you rather have a dog that can't breathe well going out on search and rescue when it's 100 degrees and dying because it won't give up and it can't breathe? No, I'd rather have something, I'd rather have a German Shepherd or something like that that has much more capability of heat dissipation and scent capability. Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
Yep. So directionality. Okay. So have to understand that we have one chamber for our 5 million scent receptors. That's it. Dogs have 2 chambers. That's actually a separate aspect. So they have stereo vision, if you will, in their nose and their scent detection. So that's why I can have a dog working along search and rescue. We're moving across an area of operations, and the dog knows because there's one more particle in this side of the nose than on this side of the nose as the air comes to it, or that footstep has one more particle than this that degraded. We know what directionality is, and we can move in that direction because it's more instead of less. And again, 1 particle in 10 quadrillion is all they need. So again, understanding that they are capable of picking up directionality. Matter of fact, recently, I think last week, I posted something about directionality and sniffing and patterns and all that stuff on my Facebook site. And that's important information if you want to understand these animals and what they're capable of. So look at that, go back and look at that. It's on the Canine Human Relationship Institute Facebook site about directionality and the scent detection. So with scent theory, it has to do with fluid dynamics, hydrodynamics, and how air moves. There's trailing, tracking, and air scent. Okay. And so tracking is literally going from footstep to footstep or following along a higher path or whatever else. So the dog is on the ground and going from this spot to that spot, where trailing is using that information as well as what's in the air directionality between those times. The dogs that I've taught have been trailing. I've had 1 air scent dog, which I still have. She's 18 years old now, which is my Siberian Husky Bella. She's the best air scent dog I've ever seen. And I won't go into those stories about that, but basically, so all my German Shepherds have been, trailing dogs using both foot, I'll say vegetative and RAF scent in the air. So let's go into, I'm not going to go deep into that. If you're interested, there's sources that I can give you that you can read up on scent theory and how search and rescue works. What's the best way to do it? There's different organizations out there. One of the best and really changed the whole thing was they were in, I believe, Snohomish area of Washington. That's where they started about 30, 40 years ago. So Washington State. You guys are always losing people up in the mountains. So they got lots of practice all the time. So they started doing a lot of the trailing aspect of things rather than tracking. And it changed the way everybody thought about things. So anyway, vegetative versus raft scent. I usually just ask so anybody knows, but I'm going to go ahead and describe it. So vegetative scent is disturbing the ground, whether it's mud, soil, leaves, grass, whatever else. When you walk across it, move across it, roll something, drag something, you are disturbing that. You're crushing that material, and therefore it causes a greater amount of particles to come up from it. The dogs can detect that instantly, easily. A raft scent is the material that comes off of what they're tracking or trailing, okay, which is in most cases, a human in this case. So there are 20,000 skin cells that slough off of you every minute of every day. So skin cells are easy to pick up. Particles off your clothes, the stuff off of the bottom of your shoes, all of that stuff, that's the raft scent. Dogs are rock stars at picking up both vegetative and raft. And frankly, any dog is capable of it. That's what they do. That is their universe. The dogs that we use as working dogs for search and rescue or detection in any type, those are the ones that we are able to teach that want to work with and for us. And we're able to teach which scents that we want them to detect and indicate to us. All dogs pick it all up. It means something to them. They don't know that it means something to us and what we want of it. So the dogs that we teach as working dogs, those are the ones that we're asking them, frankly, to tell us what's there. And so that's the whole process of it. But all dogs are capable of picking all this stuff up. Okay. And so the discernation of that's what we're talking about, is when we ask a dog to detect something or a category of things, explosive detection, for instance. Mia was an explosives dog. And so she was able to pick up particles of gunpowder days old from a shotgun shell that was put on a bumper of a truck as we walked by randomly out at the airport one day. And she whipped around and alerted on that. And I had to call DPS in, and their dogs did the same thing. So when the guy came, he was a contractor, he came, they were talking to him for a while, and finally he went, I went hunting last weekend and put a shell there. And everybody went, oh, okay. So it was no big deal to them, but he was afraid they were going to arrest him, tear his truck apart, et cetera, et cetera. It wasn't about drugs, it was about explosives, and the dogs that they brought, I made sure that they understood this is an explosives thing, not a drug thing. So anyway, so that gives you a little bit of information there. So here's the nasal cavity in a dog. You can see the relationship, the brain, and all of that stuff. Better illustrations here in a moment, but this one right here. So the olfactory epithelium is a cross section. It's basically they use the word catacomb. That's a good word for it. And you can see where it is in relationship to the olfactory bulb. It's literally immediately adjacent to the brain there. This is where they breathe in and they get the scent into that area. The cross section of that, the square inch surface area for their 300 million receptors is 30 square inches, whereas in humans it's 1 square inch. And again, it's separated in dogs, so they have stereo smell. Pretty amazing development in evolution. There's another sensory organ that's called the vomeronasal organ, also known as the Jacobson organ. And it detects pheromones, and that's where it's in the palate area of the dog. So they both detect in the nasal cavity, as well as they're trying to, when they go down, for instance, because it's a pheromone detector, when they go down and they're sniffing some other dog or animal's pee and they start looking like they're licking it, they're trying to get that scent up both in their mouth and their nasal cavity to detect the pheromones of, is that a male, female, is it healthy, what do they have to eat, all of that stuff. It's picking up that type of information with it, okay? The other amazing development is the nostrils themselves. So there's the holes in the center and then the slits out to the side. So the holes in the center are direct intake, and when they breathe out, a percentage of that air goes out the slits to the side so that it doesn't interfere with this, what they're detecting here, and that scent. In other words, they don't breathe back out on top of it. They push it to the side. So that's an amazing development again by nature. And so I don't know if you've ever puffed out, but when you breathe like dogs do, in and out like this, if you can hear that, what it does is it disturbs, there's a thin layer of air, like a capillary action on everything, every surface here on Earth. You, the walls, the floor, the ceiling, the trees, your car, inside, every surface. And so that static layer of air, when they puff out, it disturbs that layer and it creates a situation where they can have more particles there to detect. So that's why they breathe the way they do. Again, I posted another thing earlier this past week that shows patterns of sniffing and how that works. So again, go review that on the Facebook page, please. I'm not going to review it here. Okay.
Can I ask one quick question along that line?
Yes.
Is the nose, when they're all of a sudden they're looking straight forward, but all of a sudden the nose almost turns? You know, they're still facing forward, but the snout turns a bit. Is that covered under that video?
That's they're detecting. I mean, again, I want a dog to use its nose. I want it to be the curiosity part of the brain. If they're using their eyes or their ears and no nose, that's a predator and that's a bad situation.
Okay.
Okay. So every time I work with a dog, one of the very first things I do is to invite it to use its nose by sweeping my hand to something, patting on it, having them come over and sniff. Now we're connected. They know that the important thing is to smell it, not to do some stupid trick for me.
So in the past, I've been told if my dog takes its focus off of, say, what I want them to do, and they're sniffing elsewhere, that's not a good thing. Is that, should I throw that out the window?
Yes, please.
Okay. Okay, thanks.
But again, it's all relevant to what's going on in the moment. You know, humans want their dogs to be a tool. I want you to do what I want you to do, when I want you to do it, in a human way. That's disrespectful. I don't believe in that. Okay.
Thank you.
Doesn't mean you don't train a dog. I train dogs all the time. I train, you know, to very high levels of service dogs and working dogs and stuff like that. But that's the minor part of it. That's less than 10% of the rest of it. Okay. Has to be appropriate. And again, just enough and no more. So let's look at brains now. So, excuse me, brain comparisons. So the only one out of scale is the cetacean brain, the dolphin, porpoise, whatever you want to call it. It is actually much larger than our brain, but you can see that all of them are constructed in similar ways because our ancestors, all of us, all of the illustrations here being mammalians, our brains are structured in a very similar way with the base brain, cerebrum, cerebellum, etc., in similar structural aspects. So we can understand each other to some extent. Humans, we don't know how smart porpoises and dolphins really are because they're in it. Literally, they live in a different universe than we do. And so they could be much more intelligent than us, and we don't know it because they're so intelligent. You know, much like a dog doesn't know how smart we are. So I just find it interesting, obviously. And those, so between the human, the chimpanzee, and the dog there, those are pretty close to scale. But when you think about, we only use 10% of our entire volume of brain in our lifetime, it's just what nature has focused us on for survival of the species. Every answer goes back to, how does this animal see survival? So when you ask yourself, why is my dog doing X? Well, because it's learned that it survives better doing that. Okay. So human versus dog brain, I'm not going to get into all the details here. We do that later. But again, very similar. You see the spinal cord, the medulla oblongata, which is the mid, and in the midbrain area, you see the cerebellum, similar placements, and then all of the base elements, the hypothalamus, all of those areas that control neurotransmitters and hormones are in that base part of the brain. And then you've got the cerebrum, the cerebral cortex, and all of that above and beyond that. So we're similar. We're different, but we're similar. We have different focuses. We have different tools. Okay. There's another illustration. There's another illustration. There's the olfactory bulb section. So let's look at the skulls of wolf. So I don't think you can see my arrow illustration here, can you? Oh, you can? Okay. I didn't think you could. So this piece right here, this process, I'm not going to ask you if you know what it is. Well, yeah, I am. A bunch of you guys have been through the advanced courses. What is that? Come on. Somebody's got to remember it. Okay. You're going to have to look it up then. I'm not going to tell you.
Sagittal crest.
Sagittal crest, yes. The sagittal crest is where on an animal, this grouping from the mandible, this lower jaw piece, the movable part of the jaw is the mandible. All of these muscles that go inside of this process right here go up and attach at the top of this. That's what gives it that bite strength. Okay. So the wolf, you see, has a pretty darn large sagittal crest, because coyote, not so much. And you see where its placement is a little further back. So it's a different type of bite strength and movement. Grizzly bear, you see that area of the sagittal crest. So all of that, all this muscle that's attached here that comes up on the inside, goes across the skull, is attached here. Okay. And you see wolf versus dog, we'll go back to that. So the grizzly bear, if you measure the square inch area of attachment of the sagittal crest between a grizzly bear and a wolf, it's the same square inch area. Why would that be? Anybody have any ideas?
Same ancestors?
Well, so does a coyote. So does a cat.
Same
It's
prey.
actually, it's what they hunt.
Yeah.
It is their prey. They have the same exact prey. And so they have to have the massive bite strength to crush bone of a large ungulate, an elk, a moose. You know, if you ever hunt 2,000-pound moose and you try to bite that leg, you're not going to do much damage. You will to yourself because you'll get kicked. But a coyote doesn't hunt those things. Okay, they don't hunt those types of animals, so they cannot, and they don't need that bite strength. Same for a dog. So when you look at, this is a German Shepherd skull and this is a wolf skull. When you look at the, when you look at the cranial capacity, in other words, where the brain actually is, so you see the width of a head on a dog or a wolf is like this out here, right? So when you see a massive head of a dog versus a Chihuahua, those brain sizes are almost identical, actually. What the Chihuahua doesn't have is all this muscle and bone out here. So they're much like we are. With our cranium is on the outside. There's no, our bite strength comes in here and doesn't go across the cranium. So there's a much different, it looks like this massive head when in fact the cranium is less than the size of a fist. Okay. You look at a wolf cranium and it is 20 to 50% larger than any dog. So they have parts of their brains that dogs don't. Their intelligence level is like a 19-year-old human versus a dog being a 3-4-year-old human in intelligence. Now, I dispute how it's a measuring capacity basically, and comparing a dog or a wolf to a human is really ridiculous in intelligence because they have different senses and sensibilities. So, but humans love to compare everything to themselves. So, now dog breed skull comparisons. If you look at the wolf here, this is our base of what dogs really were. You can see there's that sagittal crest. There's a German Shepherd. You can see the sagittal crest there. So pretty good bite strength right here. This is out of scale. Obviously, a Bernese mountain dog is much larger. And you see a large sagittal crest here, so a good bite strength on it. All three of these are pretty close in nature. When you look at the collie, the stuff that we did to a collie and elongating the stop, the St. Bernard is a much sharper stop. The Bull Terrier has none, looks like alien. And then we get into these aliens here, literally Chihuahua, French Bulldog, and a pug. You can see what humans did to dogs here by breeding for looks. Really destroying these animals. You can see the cranium is on the outside of these. There really is no bite strength because they can't do much of anything anyway. So humans and the time on their hands. Going back to sight recognition, so vision. I mentioned that vision is for profile and silhouette as well as movement. So one day, I'll tell you a little story. I used to have a lot of Siberian Huskies in my pack. 12, 13, and then 8 or so other behavior cases at the same time, mostly Siberian Huskies, Malamutes, wolves, wolf dogs, stuff like that. A few German Shepherds and others, occasional pit bull or dachshund. So, but I'd go into some, half price books or Home Depot or something with the whole pack of 20 dogs, and I'd hear the kids go, "Oh, look, mommy, snow dogs." What are you talking about? Finally, someone explained Snow Dogs was a movie by Disney. And I said, of course it was. And so I made a snow dog. It snowed here one time. And I made a snow dog here, profile, put a collar on it. Took me about 20 minutes to just stack it up. And then I let the dogs out. And they came over and they sniffed and they licked it and they packed around it for a long time, probably 30 minutes, just looking at it. And because they recognized the profile shape of a dog, an animal of some sort. And they were trying to figure out why it smelled weird and was so cold and didn't move. So it took them about 30 minutes and then they finally lost interest, but it was an interesting experiment nonetheless. I've had dogs that didn't react to anything react to a a poured concrete elephant shape and aspects like that. So, you know, it's all about profile, shape, and silhouette. I'll go out in the woods with my dogs, and I experimented a while back with standing next to a tree, but having a branch go, over here and something else that changed my profile. I wasn't hiding, it changed my profile and shape. And my dogs were 100 feet away and couldn't really tell where I was until I moved, and then they came bounding back to me. So there's lots of interesting experiments over the years. So canine behaviors and influences, excuse me, outside influences. Nutrition is number one that I always talk to. Is one of the first things I asked about with my clients. I would ask them what they fed their dogs, and about 95, 96% of the time, once they told me what they fed them, I said, take that stuff, give it away to a shelter or a rescue or something that can use it, and change what you're doing here. Because if your dog is not getting proper nutrition, it's not going to look good, feel good, or behave well. And so nutrition is number one on the chart. A lot of you guys, I guess, saw the post where I kind of overwhelmed with how many people have responded that they want that 3 or 4 hour nutrition canine digestive system online class. So I think I've got over 100 people that want to do that. I think I only have the capacity of having 100 people on the Zoom. So I may have to do it twice. I don't know. Anyway, so experimenting over the years with numbers of different types of foods, etc. What I'm going to have to do is kind of deconstruct what I just naturally do and know and sense and feel to do that class, which is why I put it in the future a few months, because I've got to deconstruct and teach people how I sense and feel and see those things. It's much more in-depth and complicated than just a formula. I share that formula in course 2 because for those 9 days and what we do and how we feed those dogs, it makes a vast amount of difference in their mental, physical, their feel. You see the buildup of muscle mass. The dogs feel so much better and they behave better because of it. So nutrition is number one on the list of outside influences. And most people really, they don't pay attention to their dog, the dog's output, meaning the poop, to the level that they should with their dogs, okay? The medical side of things is the other part. I have found in the past a lot of medical components that cause behavioral problems and issues people are unaware of. They trust their vets, but yet their vets are not necessarily specialists and don't necessarily look at everything every time. May get a health check, but they skip over the teeth. They look at the the level of tartar or whatever else, and if there's any inflamed gums, but they're not going to x-ray the teeth to see if there's any broken teeth below the gums or other chips and things like that on the inside. So that's one of the areas that I find is most overlooked, frankly, is the teeth and the chronic pains that happen there. The poor poor maintenance of the teeth, gums, and all of that causes all sorts of other heart ailments, lungs, you name it. It causes all sorts of chronic diseases and problems. So the teeth are a massive area that if you don't brush your dog's teeth at least every other day, you need to have some sort of spray component or gel that you put on the teeth to make sure that you're getting rid of the tartar buildup before it destroys their teeth and their gums, especially. There's stuff that you can't get to under the gums that has to be sometimes even debrided on that. And that causes health issues in the dogs. The other part that there's a lot of low-level chronic pain that people, they just get used to how their dogs are, and they don't see that the dog is actually stiff, not walking correctly, walk too wide, too narrow, stumbling, doesn't move well, especially in the spine, has a short gait in the rear, especially. There's all sorts of things there that may be arthritis, it may be a spinal issue, it may be a compression of a disc or a misalignment. It could be, a hip dysplasia situation where that joint never developed, especially with early spay and neuters that we've got. So many of those cause misdevelopment, especially in the hip area, because your pelvic and femur areas are the last bones that actually develop. When you're looking at a large sized dog, a husky to German shepherd, you're talking about 18 months before the growth plates finally. So you're looking at 16 months from a small dog up to 24, even 36 months for an extra large dog. And if you spay or neuter prior to that, organ development, bone development, and muscular development is stilted, frankly. You may be lucky. Most of the time you're not. So I don't spay or neuter my dogs, and I don't have any breeding problems either. So, and the other area that is a health situation that I look at is the paws, the health of the paws. If they're dry, cracked, feathered, they're all of those things, those toe. And actually, if you look at your hand, this is that pad that the dogs are walking on. That's the equivalent to us, that frontal pad, that metacarpal pad. So that's actually, and then if you could bend your hand up in your wrist area, that's actually up here on a dog. So the dogs are simply, they're riding on this pad and their toes. That's what they walk on. And there's all sorts of issues that in development, they can actually cause problems for the dogs. Rather than straight up and down, they're more like this, especially in the front. There's different conditions. So I look at the legs and the pads because movement is living. If you can move, you're alive. And that's many times a reward that I use for dogs is just movement. They're happy when they're moving. So a happy dog is a dog that's in movement using its nose. That's a happy dog. That's being a dog. Okay. So, and again, nutrition has a lot to do with what's going on with the pads, the teeth, all of that stuff. If you have proper nutrition, the body can take care of itself. It fills in what it needs for its own health, its own immune system, etc. If you don't have the right nutrition for the dog, it can't do that. It can't help itself. Same thing for you. Okay. And then we've got Okay, there we go. Obviously, interactions and the environment the dog lives in. Now, the environment isn't woods and nature and everything else. It's everything. It includes you. It includes other dogs. It includes the house, the yard, the car it goes in, everything. Everything is the environment. And then all those interactions that involve that. So it is the cumulative value of everything that dog lives in that creates that dog. Okay. And I hear Bosch whining, trying to get in. So I'm going to let Bosch in for a second. Okay, buddy. Bosch, come on, buddy. There you go. Sorry about that. He kept knocking at the door. So, all right, buddy. Oh, hello. Come here. Come here.
I want to see Bosch. Oh, there he is.
Yeah, come here, buddy. Come here. Wash it, wash it. Up, come on.
Oh, he's
Come on.
beautiful.
Come on, buddy. There you go. Good knucklehead. Okay, that's my boy. Okay, settle down. All right. That is one intelligent animal. Pretty amazing. This for nutrition is what I used to recommend. Again, Wendy Vollard and Dr. Brown. They did an excellent job. And this is, I believe, the original. No, this is the second edition. Some people prefer the second edition. Some people prefer the first. Doesn't matter. But this is a great guide on nutrition, basically. Okay. There's a new book out by my mind went blank. Somebody help me out. Who is it?
Karen Becker.
Aaron Becker.
Karen
Yeah,
Becker.
and,
Yeah.
and Rodney Habib.
Yeah. I have not had the chance to review that. I hear that it's really pretty good and a good guide. I used to, when I was working with individual clients, I have a 31-page white paper that was commissioned by Champion Foods, which is origin. It's not about origin, it's about the canine digestive system. I shared that with some of my upper classes. I think you get a copy of it at course 2, and I hope you guys are still referring to that. It's a good guide. It always educated my clients as to what the digestive system of a dog is, and help them understand then what's necessary nutrition wise. So obviously I am focusing on nutrition awful lot, because the body is what heals itself. Medical side just provides the ability for the body to heal itself. So you might as well start with the nutrition in the first place. Now, obviously, the environment the dog lives in and the interactions that it has affect how that all works. Because if a dog is fearful or aggressive, then it's not living in a good environment that it's learning from to not be either. Okay. So there's the medical side. Little joke there. So let's look at outside influences here. Obviously, there's humans, the other dogs around it in the environment, the living environment itself. Is it a house, is it an apartment? Do you have fences? Can it go on its own? Does it have to be on leash all the time? All of those things, you can still have a balanced dog that's really, because I've worked with trainers trying to help them improve their situations in downtown Manhattan, 100-story environment essentially where people live up and down vertically and they come out and their dog has no way of ever being off of a leash, all of those things. So we've enriched those environments. So you can do that in the most dense urban area or the most rural area. So it depends on how you do things. You have to think about what the environment is and how it can work best for the dog. So, you know, travel with humans. Does the dog go to stores, restaurants with you? You know, in a lot of states and a lot of municipalities, outside dining deck, dogs are okay there. Don't ever abuse a situation with that. Before I had service dog, I would always ask, is it okay if my dogs would be here, et cetera, et cetera? And they'll tell you yes, no, and I always respected that. Consequently, I only shopped at and went to places where I could take my dogs. There's a lot of stuff in Home Depot. Obviously, I wouldn't do that into grocery stores and places like that. Anywhere where there's food, you know, by health laws, by health code, you can't take a dog in there. So open sources of food. With a service dog, you can, but again, don't ever lie about having a service dog. Service dogs are as rare as professional football players, guys. Having a service dog and taking him around, and I see other dogs and I can immediately spot about 1 in 10 are service dogs, and that's it. And it really, frankly, pisses me off to see people lie and do stuff like that just because they want their dog there. Any dog that you carry in under your arm, that's not a service dog. I don't care if it's diabetic alert. It doesn't do that. Okay. Interaction levels with humans, dogs, others. It takes a thought process as to how you're living with that dog, what it's learning about what you are. They don't know about human activities and behaviors and thoughts and sounds. They don't know one word of the English, German, Japanese, Swahili, Kalahari, Bushman, not one word. And so none of that makes sense to them. The only thing that makes sense to them is how you interact. And if you're untenable, chaotic, and untrustworthy, that's how they see you, period. The activities that you do, they're healthy, and there are unhealthy activities with your dogs. If you're teasing your dog, don't ever tease your dog. Never, not once, ever. You're just breaking trust. Okay. All the stupid things that humans do. Sorry, I'm in a little bit of a mood. I'm a little feisty today. I apologize. The smells, sights, and sounds that are in the environment and the dog encounters. I want my dogs to engage with smells. I want them to understand the environments that they're in. You know, Bosch taking him out to various places that he goes with me all the time. If it's a new place, he instantly knows it's new because those smells aren't there. So I have to introduce him to that place and the expectations. I don't just expect him to just be him. He's not an automaton. He's not a machine. It's a living sentient being. So I have to make the effort to introduce him to what the expectations are, what we're doing, how we do it at this new location. When he has other locations that we go to all the time, he already knows those things. But I also have to remind him, okay, remember, it's this. We're a team, and that's what you should be, okay? So smells, sights, and sounds all factor in. Changes and the amount of frequency. When I was working with individual clients, and I still talk with trainers who call me all the time from all over the world, and they would say, well, my dog started doing this. Okay, how old's your dog? Oh, it's 3 years old. Okay, well, then it's a full adult. It has taken over some aspect of whatever, or it's 7 years old. Okay, well, what's changed? Well, nothing really has changed. Well, and then we get to talking. Well, my son came back from college. That is a huge change, huge to the dog. You don't think it is because, oh, that's just our son. But the dog didn't invite or had any choice in a new pack member coming in and living inside that denning area and that intimate environment. All of a sudden, there's this new being there to it. Even if it knew the guy before, he wasn't living there. He wasn't part of the pack. He was just a visitor. And so that's a massive change. Or, well, we just moved a month ago. Well, okay. Dogs don't just automatically change territory randomly. It doesn't make any sense to them. So everything is new to this dog. Humans don't think that way. They go, well, it's our furniture and it's our location. We want to do this. And so they don't ever think about the dog. So the changes, the amount and the frequency have huge influences on the dog and its behavior. Just be aware of those things. The things that you think are normal, the dog doesn't necessarily think are normal. And, someone moving in or moving out or somebody's dog you're keeping or whatever, you understand it from your standpoint. The dog doesn't understand it, and it understands things from its standpoint. So, okay. All right.
Again, may I ask
Yes.
about the puppy one? Would you like changing? I mean, he came home with the new parents or new owners. And when would you introduce him to like a daycare setting? Like that could also be in a home, just like when would you introduce a new change? Waiting until the 12 weeks around, or would you do it earlier that he gets used to the other household, or when would you?
Ideally, I wouldn't, in an ideal situation, you're building the trust, the expectations, the trust in the environment the dog is going to live in for months until the dog stops being a true puppy. In other words, the puppy pheromones go away somewhere between 4 and 7 months, typically about 5.5 months old. I would never put a dog, if I couldn't, if there was any way possible, I would never put a dog into a daycare or remote situation without the bond of those humans in that environment, the safeness of that. Okay, when you think about pups in the wild, and all of a sudden just grab them up a few weeks old and put them in a different environment for a day and then bring them back, makes no sense to them, none. And then it creates a situation where the dogs have less of a bond with that pack, family, whatever you want to call it, overall, because it has to deal with a different situation. So it can't trust that it's always going to be that base. So the bond is much less overall. So if there was any way possible that if I got a new puppy, I'm saying ideally, I'm not saying, so the longer they can wait to put it in a situation and the more they can do development with trust and gaining that animal as much confidence, self-confidence as possible, that's what I'd work on. The longer they can wait, the better.
Okay. And
Okay.
if you would introduce them to, I mean, I do boarding from time to time, right? So I'm just thinking about how could I make a
They can
caretaker
introduce the environment, the smells, the humans, the animals around, all of that stuff. They can go visit the environment. But initially I wouldn't leave the dog there.
Yeah, you would repeat these visits like where the dog gets more comfortable with the new settings, right?
Correct. Remember, 3 times is a pattern, but that doesn't necessarily stick with puppies. It may take a few more times.
Would it also help if I would go first to their home, like that's the familiar environment of the dog, and I come
Yes.
there so he can
Yeah.
smell me and
Yes.
pick up with me some, okay, good.
Yes.
And I might change that in the future.
Okay. Okay.
And how
Good
do you,
questions.
sorry, how do you maintain the dog's trust and confidence if you are changing the environment somewhat frequently?
Good question. It's a matter of creating patterns of expectation over a period of time. What time depends on the age of the dog, the confidence of the dog, reliance on you versus confidence in you. A lot of people misunderstand that reliance, that what people describe as separation anxiety, is an unhealthy situation with you and the dog. It's not about the dog. About 98% of the behavior cases, probably 2,000 of them over the years, 98% of them that people describe separation anxiety, it wasn't. Separation anxiety is an extreme OCD, and that is a long-term situation that takes months. But the typical thing where a dog tears something up or whatever else, that connection is unhealthy because the dog is actually in charge. The humans always think they're in charge. They're not. The dog thinks it's in charge. Well, actually, it is in charge. And so it's protesting the humans leaving because the dog didn't give them permission to leave. That's what actually happens. And so once you see that, recognize it, change the nature of how the humans are behaving with the dogs, that goes away instantly. Literally, I've done it so many times. That day, change the role of the humans and the role of where the dog sees itself. It goes away. Now the dog, there's no reason for the dog to protest because it doesn't have the say-so anymore. And it's not about dominance. It's about leadership. It's about trusting that human versus the dog can't trust you. So that's the whole aspect of it, is understanding that a lot of the issues and problems are the dogs don't understand and don't trust the humans to be able to take care of what's important to a dog. Okay. I mean, that was 95% of what I worked with my clients right there. Just change their relationship, change their understanding of what leadership is and how a dog sees the universe. That's what I'm trying to share with you on this basic thing. So this course right here is exactly what I used to teach all of my clients. So if you want to know what to share with your clients, this is it. Okay. Okay. Good questions, guys. So I want to get into the basis of language. So what is the purpose and intent of language? Now, language, I want you to think in terms not of human speech, but anything that gives intent. That is language. So purpose and intent. So the purpose is to affect and manipulate whatever, the environment, essentially, if you will, beyond the bounds of your body and touch, your capability of physically controlling something. So the purpose, the development of language was to affect or manipulate or whatever beyond the bounds of your capability of physically controlling something, some environment. That's how language was developed, to give it. And then the intent is to reduce your chance of conflict or give you an advantage so that it keeps you safe. That's what language is about. So our communications are to affect and to keep us safe. In other words, to have better understanding in a social situation, all of those things. That's what language is about. Whatever language you use, and I don't mean human speech, how you present yourself, what you do, where you look, where you step, how you move, your stiffness, your smoothness, your flow, your physicality, all of those things are language. It gives the intent behind what your intent is, what you feel, how you feel about yourself, the situation, and that other entity or entities that are around. That's what language is. So stop thinking of it in terms of human words, because they mean nothing to any other animal. Okay. So, okay, I'm going to give you this, excuse me, this exercise. And for those of you not auditing, so in this course, there should be 10, 11 of you, whatever else. I want you to do a video of yourself, get a partner, husband, wife, friend, I don't care, whatever, another human in this case. And I want you to do this exercise. And this is one that we do in class. We line up in rows and face each other. So I'm going to use my little marker board here. Does it help if I stop sharing this screen? Can you see it bigger if I stop sharing the moment? Yes, okay. Does this help? Okay. So what I want you to do in this exercise, and I want you to video it. I want someone, if the camera's over here or whatever else, I want you to video a little bit of this, and I'm going to give you a few things to do. Okay. You're going to have you and another person. Okay. I want you about 12 feet apart. So that distance is somewhere around 12 feet. Everybody know what 6 feet is now? Probably. Okay, or 2 meters, whatever you want to say. So that would be double that. So 4 meters or 12 feet. Okay. And that gives you enough space and time to learn things about approach. Okay. So one of you, what I want you to do is I want you to switch back and forth on each one of these exercises. Okay. So one of you is going to squat down so that your head is at the level of a big dog, German Shepherd. Okay. If you lay down on the ground, you can be a Chihuahua. All right. But so in other words, so you've got a human standing here, and then you've got another one squatting here, with the head generally at a shorter height, right? So you're closer to a dog's level of height. So when this human approaches and creates all these approaches, you're going to feel what it feels like to be that dog being approached. You're going to take turns because you're going to do it to that person too, and practice these different approaches. Now that you see what it feels like, and then you're going to have that experience for that other person too. Okay. So I want you to video some of these. Now, what you're going to do is I'm going to give you a list of, I'm going to post on the Telegram site, a list of the different things that you're going to do. Okay. I'm not going to take the time to do that right here, but essentially what you're going to do is different approaches. Sometimes you'll come straight. Sometimes you'll go on an angle. Sometimes you'll go around. Sometimes you'll stop at various points. And there's another exercise where we go very slowly so that when this person says that's close enough, basically what they do is instantly hold their hand up and you stop at that point. And I want you to see what that distance is. I'm not going to tell you what it is. I can tell you exactly what that distance is when that person goes, that's close enough, and tell you exactly what it is, because I know what we did studies. I did studies in Rome for 3 months about angles and closure and all of that stuff. And this distance depends on the heights of the heads. So I'm going to give you a list of those exercises, and I want you to go through them. I want you to video them as you're doing them. They can be short and quick. Okay. Don't have a 20-minute video. We won't be able to watch it. It'll take forever to load. Okay. So take each one as a separate video if you can. Okay. But work with a partner, and I'll tell you and illustrate some of those, okay, as an approach. And those should be up and ready for view by next class. Okay. So this is your first home assignment. So, okay.
Nelson, would you
Yes.
expect with all what we are going through with COVID and the distance, that this distance that you have in mind that you studied would have changed? Because
No,
people,
it actually doesn't.
okay,
This is about closure, not the mental aspect of fear.
Mhm.
Okay. Because dogs don't have that mental aspect of disease fear. Okay.
yeah.
So this
Yeah.
is about
No,
how
I
the dog
mean,
feels.
yeah, I mean, with the people, when I do this exercise with the
Yeah.
other person, I mean, we are now
Put a
trained.
muzzle on them.
Yeah.
Sorry. You can be in Tyvek suits or something. I don't know, whatever it takes. Oh, there's Laura. Couldn't see you there. That was Robin. Okay. Kel, I see you got on here. Courtney. There's 214 something or other here also. So, all right. I'm going to go back to share screen. Okay. Huh. That's interesting. Okay. So there's where we are. There we go. Okay. 35 minutes left to do some more. Here's some, I just had some photos from years ago. I used to do just open invitation pack walks. I'd say I'm going to be at this park if anybody wants to come. So whoever showed up, showed up. Sometimes it was dogs with pretty bad issues, other stuff. I was getting a few of my dogs out of the vehicle at the time. Someone started taking photos, and this was about a 90-pound male husky. I think he was about 4 or 5 years old. This guy had. This was one of my clients right here, who had this was a 9-month-old puppy, a wolf dog, pretty high content wolf dog. But I wanted to show you, this guy was completely rude, and so he didn't trust him. But I wanted to show you the next photo where my pack, and of course, he had never met my pack. This was the first time they ever came. I'd worked with them probably for 3 months with this animal, and they did a fantastic job. I read them the riot act. They took it all in, and we had a great time. So this dog had smelled me, knew me several times, and obviously had the smells of my entire pack. So he already trusted that smell. And I wanted to show you this next thing. Look where he presented himself. See the size of this puppy compared to my dogs. And I think he was already about 120 pounds at 9 months old. But he presented himself perfectly, put his back. So he trusted us because he trusted me, and he knew the scent of these animals, my dogs. So very polite. Actually, they did a great job. Loved the animal. He was great. Yeah, just some of the pack walks. You can see people all the way back down the trail and stuff. A lot of these dogs were highly reactive, highly aggressive dogs to begin with. This one I like to show because here's Max, Daryl, and Max. Daryl was, and that's his wife, actually working with the wolf pup, which I thought was interesting. She took him for a while, but Max was a dog that tried to kill me when I walked in the door, literally tried to gut me. And about 2 hours later, we were best buds working out in the woods, nose work, and I was patting him on the back. So anyway, I won't go into details there. I can talk about that in future stuff. I've got a lot of severe case behavior stories. They're not stories that are real, but I can share lots of things with people to make them understand better how you reach animals. So, and that was the end of the walk. There's Max right there. And they had actually gotten a female dog because he did so well. He was doing great. A couple of these huskies were real bad dogs too. The Pibble. So anyway, so in these, there's lots of little illustrations and books about canine body language and all that stuff. And the way I look at those is they are a snapshot in a moment that are always out of some context. And so while these are good on an extreme cursory level, it's like you saying one word and expecting everybody to understand the rest of it. So you're missing the paragraph or the story behind these little illustrations. You know, when people send me photos or they send me videos, the videos I can see instantly what each one of the dogs is feeling, trying to communicate, all of those things instantly, and I can help people with that. When it's just a photo, a couple of photos is going to give me a better situation, but video is where it's always at. Okay, so there's all sorts of cutesy little things, and some of this helps if you don't know any of that, but that's not really the language. So language for canines is body position, movement, posture, intent, which is the huge thing, distance, and speed. Those are the major categories that they try to communicate with. Body position and posture encompass all of those things of ears, base of tail, movement, curling around, whether the dog's upright, down low, all of those things. So, but those are major categories. Movement is a huge category. Distance is a category. Speed of movement, of closure, of moving away, all of that stuff is a huge category. And the intent behind those things is the biggest thing. If you take nothing out of this entire course but intent, your intent influences the dog, or the dog's intent influences you. I don't negotiate with dogs. My intent is always going to come through over theirs because I want to influence them, not the other way around. That's how I get dogs that are calm, composed, and can live with humans. Not because I desensitize them to idiot human primate stuff. Okay. So position. Gosh, I'm not going to have enough time to. Well, we can cover that next time. I will go through these categories fairly rapidly here. So position, in front position. You can be in the front. I'll illustrate it this way. So with humans, okay. So here's, if you can see my hands, human, face to face, right? Front. So in human language, when we greet somebody, we're face to face, eye to eye, and we use verbal language. To dogs, face to face, eye to eye, and verbal is a threat. And so when a human approaches a dog and starts monkey chattering and approaches a dog, especially over it like this, that's a threat. It's why dogs back up and do this. You're being, at the very least, you're being extremely rude. So you've already set yourself up as an idiot to the dog, and the dog doesn't trust you. Okay. You're going to learn some of that on those approaches that you're going to video. Okay. So in the front, there's different ways. Say we have a dog and we have a human here. You can be in the front of the dog this way. You can be in front of the dog this way. Much different feel, much different intent facing sideways than to the dog, isn't there? What do you think is more comfortable to the dog? There's also turning entirely with your back to the dog, which says, I trust you and I am not a threat. I don't see you as a threat. I'm turning my back to you. I have calmed down aggressive dogs, truly aggressive dogs, ones that wanted to kill me, by turning my back to them. Don't try this at home without professional help. You have to have the right timing, the right understanding of what's really going on, understand the threat, all that stuff. So, but having any type of an angle to where you are not facing into that dog, I can use my peripheral vision and still see this dog. Okay. I don't have to side eye it. I don't have to look at it. I can be looking out here, showing my intent is that way, not at you. And that's going to make this dog much more comfortable. If you're looking over here, where do you think the dog's attention is if it starts, if it doesn't trust you, it's still going to be here, but it sees your intent is not against it. So if a dog starts to trust you, it might actually go, hey, what's over here? That's where you're influencing the dog. And that I'm always trying to influence the dog with how I position myself and what I'm telling the dog in communication. Okay. So that's front. To the side. Okay. So the dog is facing this way. Humans facing this way. This is an extremely vulnerable position for the dog and very uncomfortable for a human to be facing that dog this way. Okay. Facing this way. Now we're together. We're both doing this. You can make that choice to say, hey, we're together. I'm focused on what you're focused on. You can also turn this way, opposite way. And now you're covering this dog's side. And you can turn to the back of the dog, turn the opposite way and say, okay, I'm watching your back, you're watching mine. So there's different ways of positioning yourself on the side to tell the dog, I'm with you, I'm looking out for you, we're buddies, instead of facing the dog and looking at the dog. Okay. To the back of the dog. So the dog is here, the human's here. This is extremely uncomfortable unless it's your dog out on the leash, in the lead, saying, we're doing this, idiot, come with me, because you're not even in the picture anymore. So you have no say-so, which is why a loose leash heel is helpful, because now you're partnering together and the dog can start focusing on what you want. Now with sled type dogs, pulling dogs with huskies, about half the time I let them get out front, but all I had to do was signal, and you know, sled dogs are used to millennia of taking orders, quote unquote, or suggestions from behind. So all I'd have to do is snap my finger over here and they'd turn, or snap my finger over here and they'd turn, or make a command and they would do it. And they're one of the rare breeds that are automatically lined up to take direction from behind as a cooperative partner. Okay. Whereas most other dogs, once they're in front, they're in charge. They're not listening, quote unquote, listening to you. So it depends on that level of communication connection that you have with those dogs. But a dog you don't know or do know, and you come up to the back of it facing it, that dog's probably going to turn around and look at you, because that's an untrustworthy situation. If you turn to the side, even without seeing you, this feels different to that dog. I've experimented with humans. Just stand there, we're all standing there like this. They can tell when you're breathing down their neck, literally, versus facing away without ever seeing you, versus facing the opposite direction. It feels different, and the dogs are much more sensitive to that directionality too. So we can change angles once again, position wise, distance, all of that stuff. We can use those things. Okay. And then between. So how do you control a conversation between two dogs? Two dogs are here, they're having a conversation, maybe good, maybe bad. And you're over here someplace, you're not in the conversation. So the way you get in the conversation is you step between. And stepping between breaks the conversation between the two dogs. If it's a bad situation that you are trying to influence, you step in between, you address the one that's at the higher level first, or the instigator. Always. Now, if it's at a high level, you don't understand, you may understand if it's a high level and it was about to go south and you step in between, make sure the dog behind you address also almost immediately. Hey, back off, you too. Because if you don't, you're facing this dog and this dog is hyped up, about ready to attack. Now it goes, you're helping me attack this dog, and it's going to shoot around and get after that one. So you've got to instantly address this dog, and before this dog takes advantage of the situation, you address that dog too. Back it off. Okay, you. Direction, you. Direction, it's over. Okay, so that's how you control a conversation, is to step between. If your dog is, if you're walking your dog on a leash and your dog's slightly in front of you and it sees another dog, human, whatever else, and it starts going like this, and you start yapping at it from behind, you're not in the conversation. So you don't pull your dog back, you stop, or you move in front of your dog, you get your dog's attention in that motion or in that stop. You get your dog's attention on you. You can only control your dog, which influences the other dogs and humans. That's how you do it.
So are you saying you move in front of them, or like you're looking at your dog? Say another dog is approaching Nelson and my dog's a little bit ahead, alerted.
I don't look at my dog unless I'm addressing it. The reason I don't look at my dog is because if I look at my dog, they're in charge. I'm saying, what do we do, dog?
Yeah.
I'm scanning everything else. I don't look at my dogs when I'm going on a walk. My job is, I'm the leader. I need to know what's out there. So I'm scanning and looking at everything and seeing that situation. They recognize it, they see it, and they understand that I'm aware of everything. If I'm looking at them, I'm unaware of anything out there.
No, that I understand because I do that. But I'm saying if a dog is coming in and my dog is a tiny bit ahead, which I don't usually allow, what am I doing? I'm trying to understand exactly my position in order to stop that.
So the first thing, well, what I would do is go, hey, because that gets my dog's attention on me. And then I can direct them behind me. It's very soft. It's very easy. Most people don't even notice it. But if it's a situation where most people have where the dog's in front, then they are going to have to kind of come up the leash and get their hand, their face, and everything else in front of the dog to go, hey, over here. Because you've got to be in the conversation. You have to break that concentration between your dog and whatever else is going on. Okay.
Right, that answer.
So you
Thank you
take
so much.
back the leadership position, not through dominance, but just through communication. Okay. Does that help?
Completely. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Postures. There's so many postures. We can go over a few things. When you're laying down, there's a lot of different postures that dogs have laying down. Any of the postures that your dog is laying down and it has it's on the ground and it has its shoulder here and that elbow ready to pop up, it is literally ready to pop up. It doesn't matter what else the back end is doing. Okay, it's ready to pop up. It is not, it's in a ready position. It may be relaxed, but it's in a ready position. When a dog finally lays out to the side with the shoulder and the elbow on the ground, then it's completely comfortable, relaxed, and it's not in a ready position. Okay, so those are the two main areas. There's so many things that I could go over on that, but unfortunately, we don't have the time. But basic ideas while I'm trying to get to you. Okay, so sitting, the old trainer saw if a dog is sitting, it can't get in trouble. I used to laugh out loud when somebody'd say that. Really? Dogs can sit a number of ways. But it also, what I'm looking at is not just its behavior, its understanding, or its communication, is what is the health of that dog? If those legs are falling out like this because of some hip problem, or it sits on its butt on one side always, you're looking at various aspects of, the spine, all of these other things that dog may be giving you signals and communication about. So there's a number of ways to sit. There's forward, there's kind of a lean back, there's a lean to the side. There's all sorts of ways that dogs sit. It gives you some clue on what's going on. Standing and body postures, there's a number of ways that dogs stand. There's the straight up and down legs. There's the forward aspect. There's the forward aspect of head down. It's a dangerous situation. There's forward aspect, head up, chest out. That's a very confident dog. There's the leaning back with the head down. That's that fearful or protective aspect. There's leaning back with head up, so in anticipation of something. There's leaning away from you too, sideways. So a distrust there. There's different aspects of curling around. So a dog, I used to point out to my clients, a dog going around with the tail toward you is trying to make a connection. They're saying, hey, I'm not a threat. I want to make connection with you. All of these things, they're trying, I hate to say it's submissive. It is not a submissive. They're not being submissive. They're showing that they're not a threat and that they wish to encounter in a physical way, not necessarily being petted or anything else. I've had dogs walk by me once they get to my house and they see after a couple of days, everything's fantastic, and they're understood and all that stuff. As they walk by me, they just barely touch they kind of move their tail over and they touch my leg as they walk by. And it's just that thank you connection. If a dog is curling around you and it's got its tail away, watch out, because that's stalking. That's herding and stalking. That's a dangerous situation. And I can't tell you how many German Shepherds I've worked with over the years at clients' houses. If they start doing that, I'm going, call your dog back, or we're going to have a problem right now. Because they start trying to get a tactical advantage. They're trying to keep their tail out of the way. The ears are doing all sorts of things at the same time. Okay. So movement, forward movement. Easiest way to think about this is forward as being a predator, away as being prey. That's not a hard and fast rule, but that's an easy way to think about it. So if you're moving away, especially in a fearful, submissive, or anything else, you're prey. There are ways to move away that don't make you prey. And that's the composure, the nonchalant aspect, the thing of, yeah, that doesn't bother me. I'm going over here. There's ways to move forward that are the same thing, that don't mean predatory action, but you can take advantage of if a dog does something that you disapprove of, not because you want it to be human, but because it is a non-pro-social situation, it's an anti-social situation. If you move forward silently at that dog, you're going to get the attention of that dog. Don't do the monkey chatter crap. Okay. That's just cacophony of sound. And actually anything that makes a bunch of noise like that, especially higher pitch, squeaky, or tension in the voice, is actually prey. So shut your mouth, move toward like a silent predator. That's what you're trying to show, and you will get the attention of those dogs. Okay. Move on angles. That's what you're going to practice. You're going to see what happens. Moving on angles means you can approach a dog that may be fearful of you, and it sees you are not intent at it. Don't stare at the dog. You stare at where you're going. That gives the intent of, I'm uninterested in you, but I'm coming closer to you. You should not fear me. Okay. So angles is a massive part of how you move and how you signal. Okay. And that's, I hope I teach that well enough to you guys in the advanced classes to understand it better. Herding and stalking, I put those together because they both have the same base, which is stalking and herding. In other words, singling out an individual from the herd to kill it and eat it. That's what that's about. And so that base level of understanding, thought, etc., in that predatory mind, that's a canine, a dog, is still there. It's always there. Every dog has it, all of those. Okay. But you can use that too against them if you disagree heavily with an antisocial or asocial behavior. Okay. So distance, everything from touch in class, in normal class, I usually set someone up and ask them to stand up so I can use them as an example. So touch is intimate space. To be able to do that, you have to have a partner, dog, human, whatever else, that is trustworthy itself and that they trust you to an extreme level. So touch makes no sense to a dog who someone comes up and says, hey, can I pet your dog? No, you're not a part of their world. You're unimportant. You're rude. Don't do that. It's like me going up to some random woman and going over and hugging her. I'd be put in jail. I should be. Okay. It's no different. So, think about it in terms of those situations. The dog has the right to be left alone. It is a living, sentient being. It's not a toy. So touch inside 3 feet is called intimate space. Okay. And to have anybody inside 3 feet must be a trusted human, dog, whatever else, to allow them to be inside 3 feet. Okay. At 3 feet, that is a normal arm's length for us humans. It's arm's length. It is a trusted situation where you've already introduced yourself to that individual, or they know you previously, and you trust that they're not going to attack you. So the handshake at 6 feet to show I have an empty hand, I don't have a weapon in it. That's where the handshake came from. And the other person at 6 feet reaches out and we make connection. We shake hands, agreeing we're not going to attack each other. I don't have a weapon. And that's when you step to that 3 to 4 foot distance and are comfortable with our communications human wise. These distances work the same way with the same aspects for dogs and humans. I've experimented with it for 45 years. They all work at the same distances. At 6 feet is a, I don't know you, I don't necessarily trust you, that's close enough. We'll have a conversation. We'll see if we wanted to bother getting to know you, or I'm just walking away. Same thing with dogs, same thing with human dog. Okay. Same distance, same exact distance. And you'll see through those exercises some of these distances as well. Okay. At 12 to 15 feet, excuse me, that's the distance I call the panhandler distance. You know, panhandler comes up, hey buddy, you got some spare change? You go, that's close enough. That's the 12 to 15 feet. That's kind of that whole aspect. And again, dogs who don't know each other, humans and dogs that don't know each other, that's about as close as you want, because at 6 feet, at 3 feet, we call that the reactionary gap. I'm already inside your reactionary gap. At 6 feet, you've got a moment to process that someone's moving at you to be able to survive that moment. At 12 to 15 feet, I have time to actually think, make a decision, and move in tactical aspects. And that's why that's an important element, okay? At 30 feet, that is now at a tactical distance where I have time to think, move, and find cover or a weapon to defend myself, if you're trained that way. So 30 feet, that's the first level. I used to train U.S. Department of Defense SRTs, special reaction teams. And we would sit them in a room. We'd have them come into a room. We were already into it individually. All they were told, they had their holstered weapon, used rubber bullets with cap charges. And they would be told, hey, there's a guy in there, he's acting erratic, go figure it out. And that's all they were told. And so they were taught the old 21-foot rule about knives and all that stuff. So they thought they were safe at 30 feet. And we'd be over muttering or doing something, walking around back and forth, and they'd be, barking out commands and stuff like that. And we'd ignore it totally. What they didn't know, we had them put white T-shirts on. What they didn't know is I had palmed a red marker in my hand. And so they didn't even see it as we were walking back and forth. And there were 4 of us that did this a lot. And all of a sudden we just run. Of course, we had tactics. We knew how to get to them anyway. Well, they'd be able to get their firearm out, maybe fire 1 or 2 shots, but it was always all over the place because we're coming after them, screaming, about to, in their minds, kill them, just shock them, basically. And so they didn't know how to move. They didn't know how to tactically, et cetera, et cetera. And, literally out of 100 different times, I was hit twice. Once with a rubber bullet right there, just barely nicked that web of my hand. And the other time was just barely grazed my calf muscle, never would have slowed me down. And we had them just cut to pieces all over the place with that red marker. So it got them into a sense of, then we could teach them how to move, how to manipulate distance and time and all that stuff. So if you're not trained, even at 30 feet, you may have a problem. Because what happens, especially with a human, is if a dog starts coming at you, you lock up, you tense up and you lock up. If you're not trained to do something, you're not going to do it and you're still going to be a victim. So instead, you have to become a predator. So at 100 feet, you start losing micro muscle understanding, a lot of the communication, et cetera, et cetera. But again, these distances work with humans and dogs. There's a lot of other stuff in between 50, there's 300 feet. So the distance that a dog reacts also tells you how severe that case is beyond 100 feet, okay? So intent is literally the energy you project. I go back to the definition of energy is not California definition. It is we are frozen energy. That's all physical anything is, or literally energy just frozen. And you project heat, you project all sorts of different types of energy out of you. So it exists. And dogs sense that energy. So the intent is what you project. And it is also what is in your mind. If your mind is flustered, clustered, typical human thinking of the past, the future, what I got to do now, what I'm worried about, all of that crap, your mind is not focused and you don't have any intent. So you have to work on focusing your intent for that moment. And if you focus your intent for a few seconds, that's going to be massive. You're going to have influence over the situation. Okay. So it's, if you wanted to learn how to truly have a state of mind, there's a book by Tokuan Soho. It was a 16th century Japanese Buddhist priest, very famous at the time. It's called The Unfettered Mind. If you want to read that, it takes you about 3 times of reading it over a year to finally begin to understand it, because it's so esoteric and in depth, but it starts making sense. The unfettered mind. And that was and still is a study for Japanese business, martial arts, et cetera, et cetera. Okay. Are you relaxed versus tense in any way, including your voice? If you raise your voice up, that's tension. Focused versus unfocused, that all comes out in your intent. Okay. So I had a few photos here. We'll end up with this, and then we'll get back into much more in-depth scientific stuff next time. I do want to see the videos of the exercise. I will put that out probably tomorrow for you, so you have enough time to do things. This was Captain. He was my 90-pound, what was he? He was Pit Dobie Husky mix. So mostly Husky, but he was the big boy. He was about 90 pounds, solid muscle. This was Falcon. He was a wolf dog I was working with. He was wolf, husky, German shepherd mix. He looked mostly like a husky, but he was about 160-pound guy. And so, and that was skinny. But Captain liked these little toys, chew things, stuff like that. He'd carry him around stuff. So he had dropped that one. He saw Falcon start walking this way, and he blocked him. You see the curve, you see the tail away, you see the ears back, you see the tension in the mouth. And he blocked Falcon from going over there because he was concerned about this. Falcon didn't care about it, but he's showing him by his body, his action, his curving and all that stuff. Hey, I don't want you over there. And Falcon goes, okay, and just turns around and goes away. So here's a guy that weighed 70 pounds more than Captain, stood up at 6'4". And he goes, so it's not the size, it's the intent. That's what I want you to see. There's another good example of Charlie, the dog killing 18-pound Jack Russell versus the 116-pound Malamute. And he started to try to cut Charlie off. Charlie stopped, looked up at him like, no, you don't. And the Malamute goes, okay, sorry, and turns away. I wish I'd had a video of it. All I had was the photo, but it was a good setup. Charlie backed down a 200-pound Mastiff that had gotten away from the owner and was charging him. Charlie just looked at him like, yeah, come on, I'll bite your legs off. And the Mastiff stopped, turned around. So said, I'm not a squirrel. This was Mia, my dog. She was one of the search and rescue dogs in explosive detection. This was Taylor. She came in. Mia was about 75 pounds. Taylor was about 105 pounds. Came in supposedly aggressive with dogs. Took me 30 seconds to change her. She was a fantastic dog. I could have kept her. She was wonderful. And this was when I went to pick up Taylor and work with her down in, where was that? Waco, or no, all the way down to Austin, I guess, northern Austin area. And that was meeting them halfway. And this was a trainer who thought this dog was aggressive, couldn't do anything with her. And so picked her up. I had Mia and Captain with me. And she asked, well, are you going to crate Taylor, or are you crating your dogs all the way back? I never crated a dog in my life. She goes, well, good luck with that. Well, 30 minutes of working together, they were best buds. Put them in the back of the Tahoe, came back, came through in the backyard. And this was the first moment that Taylor was there. And Mia kind of blocked her and said, no, I don't want you in that area. And Taylor goes, okay, it's your place. That's what you've got to understand. Okay. So we'll call that, hey, pretty good timing. We'll call that the end of today. I will set you up with the exercises that I want you to do. Video it if you can, but make sure you got another cooperative human, and make sure that you trade positions each one of the exercises. So one person down as the dog, the other person as the handler, and then immediately switch. The other person becomes the dog and this person becomes the handler. Then go to the next exercise. Okay, that's the way you should do it. So I'm going to stop sharing and I'm going to stop recording.